Okay guys, in this particular lesson we're going to be reviewing how to graph various functions that we've talked about this year. The first 10 are graphing linear functions. After that we look at some quadratics, both in vertex form and in standard form. And after that we get into some square root functions. So let's begin here and we'll talk about linear functions first. So linear functions look like this. The first thing to do when graphing a linear function is to take that value there, which is the y-intercept, and you're going to plot that first on the y-axis. So that's the first step, so I'll label that as 1. The next step is to take that number there, which is the slope, and you're going to use that to find another point. So it's rise over run is what slope is. The top number tells you how far to go up if your fraction is positive, or if it's negative, it tells you how far to go down. The bottom number always tells you how far to go to the right. Okay. Now sometimes you could be missing some numbers and things like that, or missing letters, and we'll talk about how to handle those as we go, but there's the basic idea. So we start by plotting a y-intercept and using the slope to find another point. So let's begin. All right, so draw a graph here real quick. Notice that the y-intercept is 4, so I'm going to go up 4 spaces and put a dot. And notice that my slope is 3/5. That means I'm going to go up 3 and right 5. So up 3 and right 5 would put me right about here. And then we connect our dots, and that is the graph of that particular function. Let's go ahead and move on to number 3. So in this case, we're missing our slope. If you're missing slope, it equals 1. So, matter of fact, you could say it equals 1 over 1. So we could rewrite that, if you want to, as 1 over 1x instead of just x. After that, it's pretty much the same. We start by graphing that y-intercept, which is -1. Then we use our slope to rise and run to get our graph. Sometimes you get equations like this on number 5, which are in standard form. Standard form is ax plus by equals c, or honestly, it could be in any other form also. We want the y equals mx plus b form. So if it's anything other than y equals mx plus b, basically what you need to do is get y by itself. Okay, so on this problem, all I need to do is subtract 3x on both sides, and now y is by itself. Notice I'm not going to combine the 3x with the 3 because they're not like terms. Notice I also chose to put the 3x in the front. That doesn't matter. You could have put it in the back, but it looks more normal this way. Sometimes you'll have a number here in front of the y also, and if that's the case, you have to divide everything by that number. But in this case, I don't have that, so I'll skip that. But for now, we're going to go start at our y-intercept, which is 3. Since my slope is -3 over 1, I'm going to go down 3 and right 1, which would put me right there. All right. In this case, we have just y equal to a number. And when that's the case, your graph is really just going to be a horizontal line. So for instance, I'm going to find where y equals -5, and I'm just going to draw a horizontal line there. and that would be the graph of y equals -5. Sometimes you have just x equals a number, like here on number 9. And when that's the case, your graph is simply a vertical line like that. So the graph of x equals 3 would be going over 3 to the right on the x-axis and drawing a vertical line there. All right, so for number 11 now we're switching gears. We're no longer talking about linear functions. We're talking about quadratic functions. So let's look at some information about that. So now quadratic functions can come in two different forms. They can come in vertex form or they can come in standard form. We will talk about how to do each one of these. First of all, we'll talk about the vertex form method. Okay, so for the vertex form, we take that number, but we do the opposite of it. And we take that number, not the opposite, we keep it the same. And that makes up your vertex. That's our starting point. After that, we use this number to determine whether we have a happy face or a sad face parabola, and that's based on whether the a value is positive or negative. If it's positive, our parabola is going upwards. If it's negative, it's going downwards. And it's that simple. So let's go ahead and take a look at some number 11 now. So for this particular question, my vertex is going to be opposite of that number and this number combined. So my vertex is going to be at -4, +2. And then since my a value is positive, it's going to be a happy face parabola, and that's going to be good enough to help me find the correct answer. Here's another example. Once again, take the opposite of that number to get my x, and I take that number the way it is to get my y value for my vertex. So my vertex is at 1, -3. And this time, notice that my a value is negative, so this time we have a sad face parabola. Now we're moving into another kind of quadratic. This is quadratic also, but these are in standard form, and the way to graph these is a little bit more work than the last one that we did. Let's take a look at those. So when you're trying to graph a quadratic in standard form, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to do the vertex and decide whether it's a happy face or a sad face. And in the same way, positive a is a happy face and negative a is a sad face. But the difference is in the way you find your vertex. When it's in standard form, you can't just look at it and see it. You have to calculate it. To get the x value, we do -b over 2a. And to get the y value, we simply plug that number into the equation. So that's how we'll go about finding the vertex when we are in standard form. So let's go ahead and take a look back again at that question that we have. In this case, the a is the number in front of x squared, which is -1. The b is -8. The c is -13, but we don't really care about the c value right now. So to find the vertex, the first thing that we do is we take -b over 2a, and we plug those numbers in. So b is -8, a is -1. That's 8 over -2, which is -4. So that's my x value of the vertex. To find the y value of the vertex, we just take our quadratic equation, and we're going to replace those x values with our answer that we got up there. So we have -16 plus 32 minus 13. Combining those, we get 16, take away 13, which is 3. So there's the y value. So that means that my vertex will be at -4, 3. So let's go ahead and graph that. -4 up 3 is right there. Next, the step 2 is to look at the a value. Once again, notice that the a is negative, and since it's negative, it's going to be a sad face parabola. And so the graph would look something like that. And that's how we do standard form. Now we'll move on and we'll talk about square root functions, and that's our last one that we'll chat about for today. Sorry, just a second. There we go. All right. So square root functions look like this. The h and the k are going to make what I'll just call the starting point. Once again, the h is going to be opposite sign from what it is here. But the a and b determine which way the graph is going to go after that. In general, a square root function just looks like a half of a sideways parabola, if you will. But it can be flipped around and go different directions depending on what the a and b values are. So if both a and b are positive, then it goes this way. The a tells us whether we're going up or down. The b tells us whether we're going to the right or left. So this graph, for instance, is going in an upward and rightward direction. For this one, since the a is negative and the b is positive, we're going in a down and right direction. And by the way, this dot right here on these is that starting point that we talked about. If b is negative and a is positive, we would be going up and left. And if they're both negative, we would be going down and left. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at one of those problems. All right, so on this one, we are missing some numbers. So let's fill them in a little bit. Notice that there's no a value in front of the square root, so we can assume that's a 1. Notice also there's no b value in front of the x, so we can assume that's a 1. Now we've got all of our numbers there. So my starting point is going to be the opposite of that number combined with that number as it appears. And that's my starting point. So I'm going to graph that, left 1 and up 5. After that, I'm going to look at my a and b values. That's these two. Since they're both positive, I go up and to the right. And that would be my square root function. Let's take a look at another one. Sometimes they come backwards like this one is, so I want to rearrange it first of all. I like to have the square root part in the front, and then the number that's being added or subtracted, I like that in the back. That way it looks more normal, but we're actually still missing some numbers too. We do have an a value, it's 3, but we don't have a b value, so that's 1. And we're missing an h value also. When h's are missing, those are 0 though. Okay, so when a or b are missing, those are 1s, but when h or k is missing, those are 0s. But at this point, we're ready to go ahead and graph. So my starting point is going to be 0 and -1, which is right here. Once again, both of these are positive, so it's going to go up and right. All right, and that is it, I believe. So after that, I'll let you guys do some on your own, and we'll see you guys later.